Everyone, hello, I'm Yoko. On this channel, I will be sharing information in English that I've collected on various events happening in China, since they are not widely reported in other countries. I get my information from multiple media sources, so if you could comment on the contents of the video, I'd be happy. If you like it, please subscribe to the channel and support us. Today, let's talk about hospitals in China. In Japan, it's not uncommon to have to wait for hospital visits, but the situation in China is extreme. So many people visit hospitals every day that there's a job just to take numbers at the reception. And the medical expenses are extremely high. Even though it's a communist country, personal expenses are not as low as you might expect. Initial expenses may seem reasonable, but additional expenses can occur once treatment begins. High-cost treatment may also be prescribed even when not necessary. Patients are passive in this system. When a doctor says treatment is necessary, patients often feel they have no other choice. Some hospitals take advantage of this information asymmetry. Let's talk about a case in a relatively affluent area of China. This is about patients who underwent a series of treatments at a hospital. They first received counseling at the hospital using the internet. The next day, they were told they could have the test done within a day, and it would cost 5,000 yuan, about 100,000 yen. However, after the surgery, they were informed of additional post-surgery treatment costs, reaching 12,538 yuan, about 250,000 yen, more than double the original cost. This patient posted a complaint online. But this is common. Also, a case was mentioned where someone was told they needed the same scan again 6 days after having a CT scan at a hospital. The reason is that they need to see the results, but there's a question as to whether the first test was sufficient. In China, medical records belong to the patients and not the hospitals. This means you can take all your records with you when you go to a new hospital, giving you more control over your treatment. However, some hospitals may repeat unnecessary tests. These examples show how hospitals in China are economically and ethically exploiting patients, and this is a problem that needs to be addressed. Let me explain about unpaid salaries that are happening at a hospital in a certain region. Originally, about 700 people worked at this hospital when the salary payments started being late, but of course, some people left because they weren't getting paid. However, about 400 people are still there. So, why are these 400 people still here? One reason is that even if they're not getting paid now, they might get paid eventually. Another reason is that doctors and nurses have special skills, so if they try to change jobs, they only have the option to go to another hospital. However, it's unlikely there are so many job openings in one region, so even if they try to change jobs, there may be no job openings. By the way, I know quite a bit about the medical industry in China. People working in medical-related jobs are called units in China, similar to medical corporations in Japan. It's a bit of a hassle to change units. This is the nature of medical professions. However, there are more offices related to the Ministry of Health than normal jobs. When trying to move from one hospital to another, the procedures are complicated, and there's an uncertain aspect to it. Basically, you don't know in advance whether you'll be allowed to leave. If you want to quit this hospital because you're not getting paid, you don't know if you'll have a job later. Because of this uncertainty, there are about 400 people still working as usual. By the way, what is happening at this hospital is not an exception. Over the past few months, the same issue has occurred in 4 cases. If salaries are not paid for several months, you'll wonder why they are not being paid. Some medical equipment used in Chinese hospitals are imported, and the purchase cost is very high. For example, it is said to cost about 20 million yuan to purchase an MRI machine. This is about 400 million yen in Japanese yen. Furthermore, even if you pay 400 million yen, it is not enough. Regular maintenance must be paid for, and there are likely to be costs for software upgrades as well. Therefore, for some medical equipment, the cost of purchasing it does not end there. There is also the issue of rising drug prices. In China, the drugs used are divided into domestically produced and imported products. Among the domestically produced drugs, there are some that have different prices even though they have the same purpose. In such cases, it is up to the hospital to decide which drug to use, but it is said that there is a tendency to use expensive drugs. This is because there are people at the hospital who have the authority to decide which drug to use. Drug sales representatives to the hospital make connections with these decision makers, convince them to buy our drugs, and give them a certain percentage of the amount purchased. Many hospitals are still said to do this. By doing this, if you sell expensive drugs, your income will be higher than if you sell inexpensive drugs. Therefore, for patients, the price of drugs becomes higher. However, for hospitals, there is not much profit because they have to give kickbacks to the people who have the authority to decide. This is why Chinese hospitals are in financial trouble. Finally, in China, the wages of skilled workers are very low compared to Japan and the United States. Why are they gradually increasing? The reason is that if the salary is too low, it will be uneconomical, so to secure personnel for jobs that require specialized knowledge and experience, such as doctors and nurses, you must pay them an appropriate salary. Therefore, personnel costs are gradually increasing, which also puts pressure on hospital management. One more thing, I think this is a unique story in China. In fact, China's medical standards are quite behind compared to the world standard. People who have lived in China for a while due to their job may have used a Chinese hospital. Some of those people may have felt that China's medical standards are quite high. However, in reality, this is due to external influences. In the Chinese medical industry, those who hold important positions usually have studied abroad. Also, many high-quality medical equipment and drugs are imported. However, the Chinese Communist Party wants to promote the use of domestically produced products. If the current situation continues, hospitals may appear to be making a fortune, but the reality is that this money is being used to purchase medical equipment and drugs abroad. Therefore, the Chinese government wants to stop this, and this is similar to the idea of promoting the use of domestically produced products. Every year, a huge amount of money is flowing out of the country, and they want to stop this in the future. To do this, they want to encourage domestic procurement in China. Therefore, medical research is essential in China's hospitals, and they are required to conduct research allocated by the government. This system leads to an increase in medical research expenses, which becomes a burden for Chinese hospitals. This is not something to be taken lightly. From the patient's perspective, Chinese hospitals seem very expensive and the fees are seen as taking more than necessary. However, from the hospital's perspective, they are always struggling financially and unable to pay staff salaries. It's not just a matter of not having enough money, there are differences in the way hospitals and patients think. Hospitals are desperate to make a profit and want to charge as high fees as possible, but patients may think hospitals are making a fortune. Neither side is truly happy. Considering the current situation, what will happen in the future? Will things improve, or will they get worse? The Chinese economy is currently in a recession. Therefore, patients may want to cut expenses as much as possible. This will result in a decrease in visits to hospitals. This will economically squeeze the hospitals and they may resort to more extreme measures. There seems to be a possibility that the situation of hospitals overcharging will worsen. Hospitals may conduct unnecessary tests and prescribe unnecessary drugs to make more money. Eventually, if the situation of the Chinese economy continues to deteriorate, people may feel they have no choice but to go to hospitals. From another perspective, while patients think hospitals are making a fortune, hospitals think they are suffering financially. This is also true in Japan. In Japan, clinics without hospital beds are financially well off, and the doctors who run them are often considered wealthy. Managing a hospital is different from running a clinic because you need money for facilities and staff. However, from the patient's perspective, hospitals may seem to be making a fortune. This shows different ways of thinking depending on the position and reveals a big difference between the two. This is not well recognized in Japan either. In Japan, many medical institutions use a large amount of imported medical equipment and drugs, so the proportion of imports is very high. Therefore, in the long term, it is ideal to increase the proportion of domestically produced products and export those products. This is a very important issue for Japan as a whole. However, since many people mistakenly think that the medical industry is making a profit, such topics are not often discussed. However, if we let our guard down, managing medical institutions, especially those that accept inpatients, will become very difficult in Japan. Hospitals may seem to be making a profit on the surface, but in reality, the money is flowing out of the country, and this trend may accelerate. This is a side note, but I think Japan should focus more on research results and manufacturing know-how accumulated in the medical field, and we need people with a long-term perspective. I hope that people who understand why Japan's medical industry lacks a presence in the world will lead the reform of Japan's medical industry. This concludes today's talk. Let's meet again next time.